Welcome to The Business Strategist, the show for CEOs and founders ready to scale fast, lead smarter, and build a business that doesn't rely on them. I'm Adam Strong, award-winning strategist, former elite athlete, international speaker, and 3 times best-selling author. After 3 decades in business, I know exactly what it takes to grow, scale, and exit with impact. Each week, I dive into real conversations with industry experts, bold entrepreneurs, and clients navigating the uphill struggles of business, giving you the tools, the strategies to create more profit, more freedom, and more impact. Let's get into it. What if I told you the true value of your business has nothing to do with revenue, with profit, or market share? What if the hidden intangible asset that adds millions to your company's valuation is something that you can't even see or put on the balance sheet? It is your culture. Now, we're going to do a deep dive into today's topic that separates fast cash operations from time legacy firms and what we call the valuation gap. Why is it that some companies with identical P&Ls sell significantly more than their competitors? The secret is very simple. Culture-strong companies sell for more. Now, today's guest, we have the amazing Alex Brueckmann. This is actually our 3rd show together, but we were just actually speaking offline. We haven't actually done anything since March 23. Now, if you don't know who Alex is a Wall Street Journal best-selling author. We did a couple of episodes prior to that. The last one we did was The Next Level of Entrepreneurs. But one of the most recent books is called The Strategy Legacy, which I'm a big fan of. He's frequently over on LinkedIn. We've become very good friends. And he's got a really unique framework, which we're going to be talking about in today's episode. So without further ado, Alex, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me again, Adam. Good to see you again.
You're looking sharp as ever, Alex. But listen, we were just talking about this offline. It's been almost 3 years. What have you been up to, just out of curiosity?
Well, the past 2 years, they were quite a roller coaster, to be honest. You mentioned The Strategy Legacy.
Yeah.
Came out in October 23 and became more successful than we could have reasonably anticipated. So when the book started to hit the Wall Street Journal bestseller list, it felt like, okay, that's new, that's exciting. Let's see where this is going. And then 24 business, obviously, it was visible in the bottom line. Let me just put it that way. Nice. Not because of the book sale, but obviously because we use this book as our business card, if you want. Has been quite interesting. Brought a whole new layer of joy, fun, and excitement into the business. And we've been riding this wave ever since.
You know, it's really interesting because, I mean, you know, we've been friends for probably the best part of 4 or 5 years now. And I remember one of the very first conversations that we had, and it was a real struggle because I think back then you'd only been in Canada for about a year and you were still trying to adapt to the culture, adapt to business and stuff like that. And it was a real struggle for you. And now you've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum. I mean, how does that make you feel?
It's really interesting when you move to a different country, into a completely new culture, and you do that in 2020, which obviously, because of a global pandemic, wasn't the smartest choice. But you know, what do you do when you get an invitation to immigrate? Then you take it, right? So
exactly.
It's been quite a ride, and we've met a lot of people on the way that have had similar journeys. Canada is an immigration country. If I take a look around, my next door neighbors, they come from all over the world, and everyone's kind of here for the pursuit of happiness in a good sense. And for me, it's become a little bit of pursuit of happiness and the happiness of the pursuit. So there are things now happening that weren't possible when we first met, both from a business perspective, but obviously also from getting used to the country, the heartbeat, the rhythm of the society here. And it is something that I deeply enjoy. So here to stay, I would say.
One thing that I have observed, especially during our friendship over the last 4 to 5 years, is that you've really gone through a massive identity shift in the way that you were when we first met to where you are now. Maybe, I don't know if you would kind of confirm that, but what do you feel that identity shift has been for you? And, what's the journey been like for anyone that's kind of embarking on a similar identity shift?
I mean, the switch from, like, if you are serious about identity shifts, we have to say this is the third identity shift in my career, to be very frank. So it's not the first time that I went through it, but it is certainly the most challenging part, as this was now the first time also that I had children. So I became a father in that whole process. And that means you need to carve out a new identity while your self-identity shifts. Becoming an entrepreneur was the first big one. The second one, obviously within a relatively short time frame, moving to a different country and becoming a father. So our identities as human beings, they are, especially in our 20s and 30s, and for me, in my case, in my 40s as well, right, they were constantly evolving. And at some point you realize that what you thought might be part of your identity has been replaced by something more meaningful. And this was true, obviously, in the context of family and family values, but also in the context of you have a certain idea of how things might turn out when you, for example, move to a different continent, but you never really know. It's a huge gamble that you take. And as time progresses, as you settle in, as you find yourself more and more anchored in your community, you become more and more a part of something new. I never really painted a very clear picture of how our life would be once we settled in after a few years, because I don't think that it would have been responsible toward myself, because you simply don't know. And I accepted that very early in the process, that I'm here to learn. I think in many, many ways, being an entrepreneur has helped me to deal with that uncertainty and to also help my family through that process. Because as an entrepreneur, you've been through similar experiences, like every time you launch a new product, every time you expand your portfolio. Those are bets in your life that you take, and you cannot prove in advance whether they work or not.
Yeah.
And I guess that's my 2 cents when it comes to moving to a new country and moving to a different area of the world. You carve out your new identity as you go. It's not something that you just define and then you do it. It's something that you hope for, and then you give it your best shot every day.
I mean, life's a gamble, isn't it? Life's a gamble. You don't know how things are really going to pan out. I know that some of our listeners are looking to scale and exit. They're very passionate about what they do, and they're very, what I call, emotionally charged. And I know that through our interactions, which we don't have to go into hugely deeply over the podcast, of course. And I know that you are a very hugely emotional person and very sensitive. And I guess my question would be is, what advice do you have for those that are, I don't know, feel like they're on the cusp of something, which could be massive impact? Because I know that through our conversations, you believed in that dream so much, and you become so emotionally charged from that. And I knew, I could see from the struggle was emotionally, mentally, physically, and whatever it is. For those that are listening in right now, what's the advice that you would have for those? And I know that they say, patience is a virtue, which we use in Europe a lot, of course. And, but then speed is success. What's your take on this?
I would not juxtapose speed and patience in the sense that it's either or. I think you can feel when urgency is needed. Yes. And in other cases, you just know that it's not the right time to take a decision, and that you need to just stay put and literally put in some more work before you can do something new. If we're talking about businesses and growth, there are opportunities that present itself when you are ready, because you simply listen differently, you look at opportunities differently. Whereas when you are not ready yet, you do see these opportunities come by, and then you take a look at your own shop and you're like, yep, maybe in 2 years, I'll be ready for an opportunity like this, but not right now. I mean, this is probably one of the most difficult choices or realities that founders and entrepreneurs find themselves in, that they have an idea of where this business can be in the future. And they know why they want it to be there because of those opportunities that then present themselves. And they see those opportunities also along the way, but it's kind of like sitting behind glass. You can't reach it. You see the opportunity, but you can't reach it, even though you might want to smash the glass and go through the glass and take the opportunity anyway. It's not the right opportunity for you at this point. You couldn't even use it. It's like reeling in a really big fish into a very tiny fishing boat, and then this whole boat sinks. And that's kind of like what it is with opportunities. Sometimes they look shiny, they look nice, they are the right thing, but not at this point in time. So let them go, be patient. And in other opportunities, they come by and you know you're ready. And then it's about to decide and be decisive and actually be fast.
Yeah. And I know certainly from personal experience, and I know that you've certainly experienced this, of knowing when to make your move at the right time, which is crucial.
Yeah.
And I think that's the point, what you're trying to make here in this story. So, well, listen, this has been great. Great opening line, first of all. Now, I want to kind of get straight into the deep end, if I may, because I know that through the strategy legacy, through the book that you had created, I want to kind of set the scene here with some of our listeners, if that's okay. And I know that you designed an amazing framework called the 9 Elements of Organizational Identity, if I'm not mistaken. If you could give us a bit of a synopsis and a breakdown of what those 9 elements looked like, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they look like a bit like a dartboard, don't they?
Yeah, they do. Yeah. Think of 3 concentric circles. What these circles basically are is they are your culture, your strategy, and your execution edge is what I often call them. It's basically if you want to give these 3 circles a label, you could say the center circle is your cultural identity. Your middle circle, the one that goes around the culture, is your strategy. And around that is anything that has to do with your leadership. And if you take culture, strategy, and leadership and put them together instead of having separate conversations about these topics, then you create, or you give yourself the opportunity to create cohesiveness in your culture, in your strategy, and in the way you lead your organization. And that is when we've seen companies accelerate beyond what they thought was possible, simply because you just don't have any sand in your gears anymore. Like, it's a well-oiled organization where these different conversations happen in conjunction, where they are cohesive, where strategy, culture, and leadership are supporting each other. Not just one supports one and the other one looks weird, like the third wheel on a bicycle or something. It's like really a connection that starts to happen where your strategy shapes your culture, where your culture reinforces your strategy. And this whole dynamic unfolds when leaders have capability, skills to live in both worlds, in the strategy world and in the culture world. A lot of business owners that I've met through my career and CEOs, they are really gifted when it comes to the business as such. That's where they grew their career. That's how they grew their businesses. But they're not really, sometimes it's more accidental than anything. Like, there is just a huge load of passion and hard work that goes into building a business or leading a company successfully. And sometimes that even happens without strong, let's say, fundamental frameworks in place. And 9UI, the 9 Elements of Organizational Identity, was built based on that reality. So it's not a framework that is academic or anything. It is something that is simply what we've seen over 2 decades work, and learning from those who failed and taking a look at why did they fail, what didn't work. And that's where leadership, culture, and strategy come into play in this framework. And they are created around 9 elements. So there are 3 elements in each of those 3 circles. Mm-hmm. And if you, as a business owner or a CEO, take a look at those 9 elements and focus on those 9 elements and make sure they are cohesive, you create something that people understand, They understand why it's important. They understand what's in it for them. They understand their role in making it happen. And that's when you create a flywheel. That's when people don't need conscious supervision, where you can step out of the way and let people do their work rather than having this urge of micromanaging or being involved in every major decision. You create a framework that steers your organization in ways that it gives guidance to everyone in every job every day, so that what they do and how they decide supports where you want to take the business.
Yep. And I guess this framework that you talk about can be applied to not just larger organizations, but also the small business, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when you take a look at the customers that we work with based on this framework,
yes,
we're talking about organizations that are around 100 individuals, like really small, compared to some of the larger clients that we work with, organizations with a global footprint with tens of thousands of employees. The reality in which they operate is every time the same. They are all grounded in the real world, and they are all human beings. And that's why these frameworks function across industries. I think over the past few years, we've helped clients in dozens of different industries on all continents. And if you take a look at what they have in common, it's literally nothing other than that they are operating in a global economy and employ real people. And as long as that's the case, that we are human beings in the workforce and not fully replaced by robotics and AI, which is not science fiction anymore, but will still take some time before it happens.
That's a whole new conversation, that is, Alex.
Correctly, that's right. And I guess my point is, as long as you have human beings in an organization, we need to understand human psychology and human and dynamics.
Yeah.
And then the conversations are always the same. They are around helping people why something matters. And if you are able to do that, I'm able as a CEO to help everyone in my organization understand where I want this business to go and what the big choices are that we therefore make and how they fit into these choices and how their daily work connects to these choices, then I'm helping people to steer the ship with me rather than just being passengers. And that is something that I personally believe is absolutely critical in every organization. When human beings know why it matters what they do every day, they show up with a different energy, they show up with a different passion. And it gives us an opportunity to do more than just great work. We do it in a way that it is exciting and that it is meaningful, at least for most organizations. I mean, let's be honest, there are organizations out there that do work or are in industries where it's really difficult to find meaning in it. But in most cases, I'd say that's what we look for as human beings. We don't want to get up in the morning and just do a mind-numbing job for 10 hours and go back home and sleep again.
Yeah.
We want to know why what we do matters and how it contributes to success. And that simply means I know where I make a difference. And that's what it's all about in the end. Right. If you can translate your business strategy into meaningful work for the people in your business, then strategy becomes everyone's job every day, and everyone pulls in a similar direction rather than going all over the place.
What would you say is the big transformation that's delivered off the back of the framework? What would you is it the results differ from one client to another, or do you think that they all go towards one specific type of result?
The commonality that we see is that even really senior leaders, people that are in their late 40s, early 50s, that have seen a little bit in their life and have been around for some time, it's often really shocking to them how simple strategy and culture really are when you break all those, I don't want to sound negative, but there's so much meaningless talk about these topics that don't help anyone. So if you take all this away, it's often shocking to them how simple it really is. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple in the end. Yeah. And these conversations, when you sit in a workshop with the senior executive and you are talking about strategy, you're talking about culture and what makes it work in the real world, in their real world, the examples why things don't work, they are always the same. They always come down to the same few things. And it's often around their inability to create a cohesive story around the strategy and the culture that they want. And if you are really honest to yourself, like those of you out there listening right now, ask yourself, how well am I trained? How well am I versed in shaping strategy? And I'm not talking about what we all think strategy is, because honestly speaking, there is no really good strategy education in business schools these days or in universities. They all talk about certain analyses like SWOT and God knows what, that's a part of strategy, but that's not strategy as such.
So true.
The term has been used so all over the place for so many different things that have nothing to do with business strategy.
Agreed.
So ask yourself really, when was the last time that I wanted to understand something to its deepest core that is not within my subject matter expertise? Like if you are a CFO, for example, you've grown your career in finance. That's where you're from. That's where you're at home. If you are an operations director, chances are that all your life you've done something that eventually brought you to this role. And it's often within operations. There are very few examples that I'm aware of where people had, for example, successful careers in finance and then became a human resources officer or the other way around. There are examples, but they're rare. Yeah. So the reason I say this is, if you've done something for 20 years and now you, like, let's say finance, you've done finance in all its aspects for 20 years, you're a CFO now, that doesn't mean you're a worse strategist. No. It simply doesn't. But everyone around you in this organization, because you're now an executive, expects you to know how strategy works, what strategy is, how to formulate it, how to drive it to action. And that's then the point where I'm like, why does everyone think that just because someone is an executive knows what strategy is? Like, I became a father and I had no idea about parenting. You know what I mean? The one thing and the other thing have nothing to do with each other.
True.
But we need to accept that once you are a parent, you better do everything that you can to understand what good parenting looks like. That just doesn't fall into your lap. And the same is true for strategy and culture. Those aren't things that are typically part of someone's vocational training or career steps. It's just something that happens on the side. And then you either work in an organization where those topics matter and there is a leader that has a clear focus on these. So you learn something on that journey. Or if you're unlucky, you've been in organizations where these topics are just floating around as weird bubbles with weird labels on them, but they are actually not as important as some people claim them to be. When it comes down to success, it comes down to numbers, and that's what counts, right? So if it depends on your upbringing, sometimes you're lucky and you worked with leaders that helped you understand strategy in a deeper sense, that helped you understand why culture matters and what culture really is and how to. You can't really shape culture. That's the funny thing about culture, because it's a derivative. It's not something that you just design. It has way more to do with how you as a leader show up every day in the example that you set. There's this famous sentence that your culture is defined by the worst behavior you're willing to accept around you. So if you're a leader and someone does something that you don't agree with, if you just let it slip and be like, I don't want to step on that person's toes because, next time they're going to step on mine. That's the type of culture that you then create. It's just artificial harmony. And that doesn't help you when it comes to making tough choices, for example, which is at the core of what business strategy is, tough choices.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I absolutely hear you. I think I would say that I share the same passion for business strategy like you do. I mean, I'm fascinated because it's just something that we are both in tune to. It's kind of like you mentioned, it's that deeper understanding of what drives an engine, not the superficial stuff, but what actually drives the engine. And I think what I love about our conversations, because we share very similar core values, but we also have very similar interests in this deep subject. And I think the way that what the framework does is actually articulates it in such a way that breaks it down into saying, okay, well, you can apply this framework for someone that wants to scale a business. You can apply this framework if you want to sell a business. You can apply this, and so forth, so forth. So I think that it really gives a really good basis to what we're talking about, which is great. Now, what I was going to say to you is you would have been involved in not just scaling businesses and growing businesses. You would have been looking at it from a buyer's perspective as well as a seller's perspective as well when it comes to valuation and things like that. When it comes to, what have you seen when it comes to when a buyer is willing to pay more for a business, but the numbers are just like that? They're nothing special in terms of the financials, but what makes a buyer look and they see something that maybe someone else doesn't see? What is it about it that kind of jumps out at them and thinks, I'm going to go for this, and I'm going to bet you my top dollar that I'm going to even pay more for it? What is that thing? What do you think that thing is?
If I come from an investor's perspective, there might be 100 different reasons why I want to overpay on a business, at least overpay in the sense of someone else who does the same due diligence, has the same facts. It can go from, I just want the assets of that company.
That's true.
Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Or I want to take out a competitor, just consolidate the market. And there might be a ton of reasons, right? But if it's a regular buyer that wants to invest in a business, keep it alive, grow it, scale it, include it in their own portfolio or value chain, then I'd look at something that is not necessarily visible and that often falls through the cracks when you look at how due diligence processes look like.
Yes.
If a business, for example, a service-based business that doesn't have major assets, how do you actually make sure that what you're buying is worth its money? And
good question.
That goes far beyond your client list and your book of business. There are, and if you want to take the 9 elements of organizational identity framework to guide your evaluation, there are a few things that you should take a look at that will give you a very good indication of whether a business is worth more than the average business in that same industry. Mm-hmm. Number one, if you are an investor, you look at how does the strategy of this organization look like? In other words, what is the market that they play in? What is the industry that they play in? And how are they differentiated enough that they occupy a unique niche in this market? And that can be anything from cost leader to quality leader to time to market, whatever it is that you take a look at. There must be something so unique that you feel is underutilized and they occupy a niche. Maybe it's very early days. They just went into this niche, but you see the massive potential that no one else sees. And that is something that becomes only visible if you understand what business strategy really is and what to look for in that strategy. The second part that you then want to take a look at is your cultural core. Like beyond just the business, are these people in this organization in it to win it? Or are they winging it? Are they, faking it till they're making it? Like, how do they operate? Like, what do they value? How do they show up every day? Like, if you ask yourself what strategy is, those are the choices that you make to win, and you can write them down. You can write down these choices. You can clearly articulate where you want to play and how you want to win. And the same is true for culture. You can clearly articulate how you want to be successful. Not in a sense, what do you do, but how do you want to be who you are? That is something that only comes out in the conversations with people. Yeah. And by observing how they make decisions on a daily basis. Like it's those stories that we tell each other, the sentences that we use every day, like, yeah, whatever, that's not that important. The client doesn't see it. Like those types of things, right? That tells you something about how the business looks like. It's probably comparable to a French restaurant where the food is absolutely amazing. The plates look wonderful, but never take a look into the kitchen. You don't want to do that. And then you have on the other side, you have restaurants that have glass kitchens, right? Where you can actually see whether it looks like a war room or whether it's clean and tidy. And it's those things that you only realize when you touch it, when you touch a business, when you're really in it. That's nothing that you find in balance sheets or P&Ls that you take a look at. in due diligence processes. You actually need to be on the ground. You need to talk to these people. You need to observe. And the third part, besides taking a look at culture and strategy, is obviously you really want to understand who these leaders are. Like, how do they make decisions? How do they decide A is the right thing and not B? How they come to these conclusions, how they behave in conflict situations? How are they able to translate the theory of winning into tangible stories that matter to every individual in the business? Like their ability to communicate, their ability to inspire, their ability to collaborate, those types of things. If you see that they are in place and that they are better than the average, what you've seen, you might be willing to pay top dollar.
Yeah. Are you planning to sell your business in the next 3 to 5 years? Then you already know it's not just about finding a buyer. It's about actually protecting what you've actually built. That's where our sponsor, Adam Benedict, comes in. They're one of the leading premier M&A legal firms trusted by founders to simplify complex exits, protect value, and deliver results. And if you want a smart, smoother, and strategic exit, visit adambenedict.co.uk.
Yeah. And you know what? I think the reason why I asked that is, number one, it gives a lot of our listeners that are looking to sell in the next 24 to 36 months. But because you work with both ends of the spectrum of not just founders that are growing their business, but if I'm not mistaken, you've also got an investment fund. Is that correct? Or you work with investors?
Yeah, we have a separate company that invests in business. Yeah.
There we go. See, there, I got it right. So, but it's good to get kind of like two ends of the spectrum, because if you kind of get an idea of how an investor thinks and looks, then you can kind of get a bit of a competitor's edge of what you need to do to get ahead of the game, if that makes sense. So I love that.
100%. And especially when we talk about something like the red circle in the model, the outer circle, the leadership circle. If you take a look at which management structures do I have in place? How do your processes look like? Are they scalable? You find things in there that tell you more about the growth potential of a business, or how fickle it is, or how strongly it depends on the founder. Like that's the worst thing that can happen. Someone who does their due diligence, like when we do due diligence and the business is strongly dependent on their founder, we have a completely different conversation than if we see that a business is actually able to operate and sustain itself beyond the founder, because that simply means they have understood how to build more than just a mirror image of themselves, and then everything just comes crashing down when they leave the business, which is what you don't want as an investor.
No, absolutely not. And, and I talk a lot about this in a lot of the content that I create on LinkedIn, and also some of the stuff that we do here in the podcast, which is stage one of exit in a business, which is all about how do you exit the founder first from the business? That's the first point of call, right? And it's kind of very similar to what you've created as part of the 9 elements. Well, I want to kind of backtrack, if I may, because you mentioned a really important part, which was around culture. But when it comes to the due diligence process, for example, how does one present the evidence of culture so that seller can then justify maybe a higher premium for when they exit the business?
So if you take a look at it from an investor's perspective, what I would take a look at, when was the last time the organization clearly defined, for example, their values? And I'm not talking about these fancy words that you find on a website. I'm talking about how do they bring these fancy words to life?
Yes.
And what are examples of that? How often do people have conversations about these things? Like about their values? How do they inform how they do business? And values, while they are obviously a cornerstone of culture, they are theory as long as they're being lived on a daily basis. So look for those artifacts, look for those stories, look for those examples where people can clearly relate what happened to their culture, where maybe even they clearly cite examples where because of their culture, they took a left turn, not a right turn, where they defied logic in a sense that while everyone was pushing in that direction in the industry, they took a conscious step in a different direction. And if you can find those stories, And those examples, those artifacts, that's a very strong sign of a strong culture. If people just start getting nervous, wiggling around on their chairs when you ask them around, hey, how does your culture look like? How would you describe it? And everyone you ask, you get a completely different set of answers. You know that there is no strong culture in place. If I ask an executive team, if they have 7, 8 people, and I ask them what their strategy is, their business strategy, and everyone tells me a different story, and then I meet them and they're like, we're totally aligned on our business strategy. Sorry, it doesn't sound like it, though, and it's in the end, it's the same around culture.
Yeah.
Ask people and listen to what they say.
I think you make a really valid point there. I actually wrote down on here is that values are not words. They're beliefs and behaviors of the culture itself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I love that. Some good stuff. And I love the fact that I guess as part of that due diligence process is that, if you are looking at it from the, if you are an investor and you are looking to buy a business, for example, you're observing, and you're getting to know people to see if there is alignment and that everything gels together. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Yes, 100%. And the term alignment is if people always pretend, because it simply means as long as I'm aligned, I don't have any conflict, and no one loves conflict, to be honest. But you need healthy conflict in an organization. You need these moments where it's about the best idea and about the best way forward. And that is often only possible if you have healthy conflict and if you have a culture where you embrace these types of conversations and not running away from it, trying to have artificial harmony, and everyone has their own interpretation of what just was talked about. And we are so aligned. Alignment is a very, very dangerous. It's a slippery slope. And I see it as my job to go beyond alignment. Alignment is only possible once we speak the same language, once we use the same terminology. If we use the word strategy, we know what we talk about. In culture, we know what we talk about. And unless that's the case, there is no real alignment. Alignment is a scapegoat for many. So you really want to figure out whether there is true alignment or not.
Alex, one thing that you mentioned actually just a little bit before that, which was around you working with founders that are kind of like always growing, but kind of on the verge of burnout, literally on the verge of burnout. How does your 9 elements help a lot of founders forget? How do they make it transferable, the business, rather than make the culture dependent on themselves? Which part of the elements, and how does it help them to kind of make that transitional phase?
The worst thing that can happen from a founder's perspective is when you scale a business, when you grow a business, is that you think you need to do everything on your own. And everyone who has ever built a business knows exactly what I talk about. There are a few things that only you as a CEO, only you as a founder can take care of. And you should focus on those things and nothing else. Everything else is for other people. But there are a few things that only you can define, because especially when you're a new company, when you grow a business, they are heavily tied to who you are. One of those things is your strategy as a business, your business strategy. So you have clear ideas. You were the one that believes in a certain niche, in a certain market. So that's very strongly tied to you, which means you need to be able to articulate that. Yeah. And that's where very often it goes down the drain. I literally have a friend that runs a business, and I've asked him 3 times already in the past years, what is it that they're actually doing? They're incapable of giving me a concise answer that is shorter than 2 minutes. And every time the answer sounds different to me. So that's a real issue. I mean, we laugh about it, but it's like, it's this evil genius type of person that you find in business everywhere. Evil, obviously, in inverted commas, like someone who has this big idea, this master plan, but incapable of collaborating with someone else. Like always being the lone wolf, always being the person that has everything in their head. And then when someone asks a question, you fall out of the sky and be like, how can you ask a question like that? Isn't that all obvious? Yeah, for you it is, dude. For you it is. But for no one else. And that's what we've seen very many, like literally basically in all organizations that we work with, that around the executive table, you have people that have a certain idea. First of all, it's not the same idea. It might be similar ideas, but it's definitely not the same. And as you go down into the organization, the further away you go from the executive team, the artificial harmony and the alignment, as they call it, just fades because there is nothing to align around. They don't know where the company is going. They don't know what the choices are. They don't know how their daily business, their roles match. And that's what we often see, this inability to communicate concisely, repeatedly. It's probably one of the biggest skills for any founder and entrepreneur that wants to scale a business, is the ability to turn your ideas into words that people can understand that do not have the same background as you. That, by the way, is the reason we created the 9 elements of organizational identity in layman's terms. This is not a scientific book. This is nothing that a university professor would write. This is as straightforward and as down to business reality as it gets. And that is, in the end, how you become successful and how you create something that's scalable if the people around you understand. So that part is absolutely critical when it comes to growing a business and to avoiding burnout. You need help. You need the people around you need to understand. And if you can do that, you go from a time teller to becoming a clock builder. You build more and more clocks. And that is a very different game than being the one who pulls everything all the time by themselves.
I know for a fact that, making that transition from what we're talking about isn't so easy, because I think that it's all about self-awareness. It's easy to put into practice, words, you're going to get a founder that's listening in right now. They're nodding their heads like nodding dogs, right? But practicality, because we're all human beings and we all screw up somewhere down the line. Have you found, whether it be with some of the clients that you worked with or whatever it is, it's not so easy for whatever reason, whether it be the lack of self-awareness or because it's the lack of emotional intelligence or whatever it might be? What have you found as maybe 3 of the most common reasons why practicality isn't so practical, should we say?
It might sound harsh, but I think in business, we just talk like idiots all the time. We use words that don't mean anything. We use all this fancy terminology and just phrases that don't have any meaning. And you read something in a document and you're like, I think I'm average intelligent, but I don't understand that sentence. Like, what does that even mean? I think in some ways, moving to a different country and operating 100% of the time in a foreign language actually helped me with clarity and communication. Because if I hear a word and I don't understand it, chances are someone else doesn't either.
Probably.
Whether they're a native speaker or not, The point is, empty words, empty terminology create this illusion of substance. But people don't ask because they don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look weak.
That's true.
They read something and they hear something, and instead of being like, hey, what, raising their hand, be like, I'm not sure. What does that mean? There are 100 million reasons why they don't do it. And very often, there is simply no psychological safety in this organization to ask questions. So people be like, they pretend that they understand, and based on their assumptions, start to act.
Yeah.
And those assumptions are the root cause of all major F-ups.
Hey guys, me again. And I just want to remind you about the Exit Readiness Assessment, the most amazing tool for CEOs and founders that are looking to build a self-managing company. This will help you to identify what's blocking you from helping you to step out your business operations and effectively scale up and eventually exit over the next 12 to 36 months. It gives you a personalized report and you can complete it in less than 4 minutes. All you have to do is head over to readytoexit.scoreapp.com. That's readytoexit.scoreapp.com to get your personalized score. Enjoy.
Yep, I agree. And you know what I wrote down here? 2 words: fear of judgment. That was what it is. I
100%.
wrote down the fear of judgment and that's the reason why I believe a lot of leaders don't ask for help, because they have this fear of judgment, right? But
and the further you grow, the more this fear of judgment plays a role. And this year we started to offer a type of work that we typically, historically, never offered. We call it executive co-pilot. What it basically is that the CEO or an executive who feels that they don't have the people around them to have these conversations because of fear of judgment, they need someone outside of their circle that they can have these conversations with while they internally try to shape an environment where this fear of judgment disappears over time. But they need someone now. And that's when executives often they just become quiet. They go inside themselves and just close down, shut down, and have these conversations only with them internally. And this goes back to what we talked about earlier, Adam, this whole topic of burning out. So you need to reach out to someone you can have these conversations with. And that is, it's super interesting, the types of conversations that you then have when there is a safe space, when there is no fear of judgment. All of a sudden, executives become like, I don't want to say like my 6-year-old, but kind of like they start to juggle ideas around. They just say things that come to mind, and they're not afraid of how it sounds. They just say it,
Yeah.
And that's where the best ideas come out, when you just don't care about judgment.
It's really interesting. You made a very valid point there. So you said, as a leader begins to grow, as their business begins to grow, as their organization begins to grow, right? As that what you've seen, there's a correlation between this fear of judgment begins to grow, right? Do you think it's because they have this inclination of this, I feel important. I'm important to my organization. I'm important to my business. And that level of importance then goes up. Like, is this a kind of like this codependency of being able to let go? Do you think there's a correlation between that and that kind of like fear of judgment?
It heavily depends on the personality structure of the founder.
Yeah, of course.
Like, there are businesses that are, let me start differently. There are CEOs and company founders that are very much in love with their own ideas and very much in love with themselves. They love to hear themselves speak. They take their importance from everyone else telling them that they are important. A very much ego-driven, unaware type of individual.
Yes.
And then there are leaders and founders that are at the opposite end of that spectrum, where it's almost like you look into a permanent imposter syndrome, where you feel like they don't trust their ideas enough. They have never had anyone in their life to tell them, trust your instincts, take a risk. It's almost like they are the opposite of those ego-driven people. Yeah. They are very much aware of their own limitations. They know very well that they can't scale this without support, that they know their business will never reach the level of maturity where it can sell for good money if they cling to it all the time and make every decision themselves. So they are very, very much aware of that. I enjoy working with people the most that have a bit of both in them, that understand that they are humble enough to understand the limitations of their own knowledge, experience, dreams, and at the same time have enough self-esteem that they know that they will make it work, and therefore don't just, freeze or flight. They are there to build it over the long term. They are there to do the hard work and to pull in people that can support them at the right point in time with the right skill set. This type of leader is a person I could work with for 12 hours and then go to a bar and have another 3 hours of conversations with. That's the people you want to be around. Those are the most enjoyable individuals, I would say.
Yeah, love that. Some good stuff. Now, for you guys that are listening in, now me and Alex probably could talk about what we're talking about for pretty much hours on end, but I know we don't have hours on end. So I want to get into the juicy part now, which is all around the coaching side of stuff. Now, Alex is going to coach me. Okay. Now, here is a point in time here for you guys that are listening in. And even if you're listening in the gym, if you're listening to it in the car, whatever it is, if you haven't already done so, now's probably the time to get your notebook and pen handy if you haven't already got so, because I know that what Alex is going to be touching on right now is we're going to be touching on various different elements But effectively, it is going to be specifically for you guys that are looking to scaling and exiting over the next 24 to 36 months. So Alex is going to coach me, and I am that founder. Okay. So what I was going to say to you is listen attentively, and we're going to try to make sure that whatever the path that we take it down is that it's going to apply to you guys. All right. So make sure you make notes. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to Alex after the conversation. So Alex, where should we start with the coaching element side of stuff? I mean, listen, I'm a founder. I'd like to exit in the next 24 to 36 months. I'm intrigued about your 9 elements, of course. Where do I need to start? Where?
The first question I would ask you, Adam, is can you describe the business that you operate in within less than 2 minutes? Like, what is your industry? What is the business you operate in? Don't tell me what you sell. Just tell me what the industry is.
Very simple for us. What do I sell? We sell strategic exit advisories for legal firms. So these are legal firms that are looking to increase deal flow, that would like to create increased revenue, unique selling proposition, but also they'd like to be able to have something completely unique to the market that no other legal firm has, going from what we call transactional minded legal firms, transformational and innovative legal firms. That's what we do.
How does your ideal buyer look like? Like, do you know who's coming around the corner? Like, whom would you like to attract as a buyer?
I think our ideal buyer really is, Alex, is probably a business that has got a reasonable amount of deal flow that's coming in. So we're talking about mergers and acquisitions, of course. And for me, they are looking to improve on what they currently got. So they're humble with where they're at, but they'd like to be able to take it to the next level, whatever that next level looks like. They'd like to be able to.
Let's be a bit more specific, Adam. What do they buy? What is it that they buy?
They are buying something which is completely different, which means that they're buying, what should we say? They're buying into a framework. Yeah, they're buying into a framework that they're licensing from me because I know how they operate. They're all technicians. And what I'm trying to get them to do is I'm trying to get them to become business people so they can attract a different type of buyer, which are not quite ready to exit their business, but what we call they want to become exit ready.
If I wanted to jeopardize this deal and I would talk to your potential buyer, what is it that I need to tell them that makes them go away? You don't need to answer that question, Adam, but that's the question that I would ask.
Okay,
what is it? What is the reason? What is the dead body in the closet that you know about that they will find? And that dead body will kill the deal. So that's what I would take a look at now. Like, what are the things that you know exactly you should have done in the past, you haven't done, and those will potentially jeopize the deal.
So this is
and then you can literally just take the 9 elements of organizational identity model and ask yourself, like, which of these elements are in place and clearly formulated? Which ones do I have somewhere in my head, but we never institutionalized them? And which ones are simply not at place? And if you then just take a pen and paper and you rank these, and we actually have a 1-sheet document that's called the 9 elements of organizational identity health check. And you run this self-assessment, you run this health check for your own business, you know exactly how healthy your business is in terms of culture, strategy, and leadership. And then you know where the dead bodies are, and then you know what you need to put in place so that the business is well established to be sold, because all these elements are in place.
So what you're really touching on is psychology and why a buyer buys, right?
Yes, exactly. Like, you want to give them all the reasons that they're looking for to buy, and none of the reasons that they look for to find to lower the price or to walk away from a deal.
Yeah, this is good stuff, because I'm fascinated personally on sales and psychology, which is what you're kind of talking a little bit about. And I think you make a really, really valid point there, because it's not necessarily what are the features and what are the benefits. It's really kind of understanding the emotional triggers of why someone buys and why people don't buy, isn't it?
Exactly. In the end, it's sales, but you put it in reverse. You're not looking for your ideal client anymore. You look for your ideal buyer. And the moment you understand that if you want to sell a business, you will attract a certain buyer the same way as you attract a client. If I want to buy you, I know what I look for as an investor. And if I find it, that's an interesting conversation. But if I don't find it, I will walk away. So if you want me to be your ideal investor or your ideal buyer, then you need to understand what I'm buying. And if I don't understand that as a seller, then I will never be in a position to have the right conversation. I will not find anyone who is willing to pay premium because I cannot give them enough confidence that it's the right investment. It's the same psychology that a client goes through when they make a purchase decision. If you don't give them enough confidence that this is a good purchase, then they won't buy it from you. And in this case, it's the same thing, but you're not selling a product, you're selling your whole business.
Yeah. That makes a great thought process, actually, because there's a load of ticking time. There's a load of things going off in my brain now, like a fireworks display about all the, should we say, covering my ass type of thing around that. And I like the way that you framed that. So, okay, so in terms of the 9 elements that you have, where should I start? Apart from the exercise that you've just given me, which I'm going to go off and do, where would you start? Would you start from the middle? Would you start from the outside, or would you start from the inside?
I would always start in the strategy. And the reason is that the strategy touches both of these parts. The strategy touches your cultural core and it touches your execution. Okay. So your leadership circle, if you want, in the 9 UI model. The moment you start defining where you want to be in the future as a company, and the moment you start defining the industry that you play in and the choices that you make, that sort of defines also how your culture needs to be to support that. And you can't do this from the other side. You can't define your culture. Culture without a strategy, like a business that has a strong culture, but that doesn't have a strategy, doesn't exist.
Yes.
It is just not possible because your culture, as in performance culture, needs to support a strategy. So the moment you define a strategy, that's the moment you also know what is the type of culture that I need to create so that this strategy can be successful. And the same is true in the other direction. What types of leadership capabilities do we need amongst our leadership population to drive this strategy into action and to shape the culture that we need? How can they walk the talk? How can their people see that these aren't words on paper? That's lived reality. How do we make sure that everyone understands how their individual performance targets are derived from the strategy? And how does what they do every day contribute to success? That in itself creates an incredible amount of meaning for people if they understand why their work matters. And there are the connections between those 3 circles in the 9 UI model. If you go from the outside in, I want to understand how my work matters. So please give me individual targets that are in line with the strategy so that my decision-making every day supports my individual targets and inherently supports the strategy. So that's the whole capabilities wedge that we take a look at. One of the 9 elements is then necessary to help people make those targets work. And then when you go one step further in, you're describing how the capabilities that you acquire help you drive your individual targets, help you drive strategic targets, help you get the company to where it needs to be in the future. And if you are really, really, call it human-centric high performance, if you are able to leverage the assets in your business, and with that I mean the people that work for you, in a way that they become supporters of the culture, supporters of the strategy, then it's not you anymore. Then it's about everyone, and everyone has their contribution. And all of a sudden you realize how much more is possible than if you sit in an environment where you think you have a strategy, but it's nowhere nearly clearly defined. People don't know whom to turn to, where to look for a description of the strategy. The same is true. How do I know that I live in a strong culture? How do I know that my organization is strong enough when it comes to the human aspect of change, for example? How do we take care of helping people through the change when a new strategy comes around the corner? Like all these, how do we take care of our people kind of things in the broadest sense of the word?
Yep.
We need to take a look at them based on the strategy, and we need to look at teaching people the skills that they need based on the strategy so that they can reach their individual targets. Like all these elements are interconnected in a way. Yeah. If you're a visual person, I know this is hard to imagine right now, just us talking about it. So yeah, take a look at our website, take a look at the description of the 9UI model. It's all there. It's all publicly accessible, and you can get your head around it.
Yep. And what we'll do, guys, is we will put the link to the website and the show description notes below, so that you can so that you can go over and have a look at the 9 elements. But also, highly recommend go over to Amazon or go to Alex's website and go order a copy of the book, because that would probably make more sense. Now, I am a visual person, so I like listening to audiobooks, or if you you can also listen to Alex also over on YouTube. We'll also be publishing this amazing podcast over on Spotify video podcast and on YouTube as well. So you can kind of get a bit of an idea about what we're actually talking about. This has been a great conversation, by the way. I'd like to know more about what are you working on right now? You've got the certification program, which is up and running, which is amazing. You've got a couple of books out already, which seems to be doing exceptionally well for you. What's the next chapter of your exit strategy look like? Or if there is one?
My exit is hopefully a long time into the future, because I really love what I do. We're currently working on broadening our education footprint. So what I mean by that is we offer a whole range of online courses. Some of them are video-based, some of them are email-based. You already mentioned the life certification course, so the 9 elements of organizational identity life training course. We are adding constantly to that suite of programs simply because we see such a strong need out there that people want to understand strategy and culture in a better way. They want to become stronger strategists, stronger strategic leaders. And we're trying to not only work with our clients, with organizations, with foot on the ground, we're also trying to help more and more people understand strategy in a new way. And that's what we're currently focused on, broadening our suite of strategy courses.
Love that. If you're an entrepreneur, if you went to law school, you went to an accountancy firm, whatever it is, this is stuff that you don't get taught. Like, you just simply don't get taught on strategy. You don't get taught on business. You do not get taught on how to exit a business. Like, a lot of people just wing it. But sometimes we just need to have these frameworks or these methodologies to help aid us, to guide us towards a specific type of path. What I would highly recommend you go and do is definitely go check out some of the assets that Alex has recommended. Anyway, listen, Alex, just want to say thank you so much for being on today's show. It's been a great jam, hasn't it?
Much appreciated, Adam. The 3rd time in 4 years? Let's keep that going.
Absolutely, 100%. Listen, guys, also what I would recommend as well, make sure you go back and check out Alex's previous episodes. And listen, what's really interesting about the previous episodes is there's like they're all different, slightly different verticals, different angles, and even the energy levels are slightly different, like our conversations. And you'll be able to see from the one that we did at the very beginning, which I think was at 21, 22, I can't remember, 2022, 2023, we did March of 2023 to now, you'll be able to see how Alex has grown just from those episodes together. So, but anyway, enough from me and Alex. For you guys that are listening in, I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. Please do me a favor. If there's anything that I could ask of you, this is the first time that you're listening to this, or if you're a regular listener, please make sure that you've hit that follow or subscribe button, either on YouTube, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple, whichever is your podcast, Poison, whatever it might be. Please get and hit that and become regular listeners and hit that notification. And if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to Alex. He's over on LinkedIn. You can check him out on his website, of course. Or if you've got any specific questions that you want to obviously email myself, we'll put that in the show description notes too. Anyway, enough from me. enough from Alex. Thanks so much, and we'll see you soon. Take care. Cheers now, guys. Bye-bye.
Rinse knows that greatness takes time, but so does laundry. So Rinse will take your laundry and hand deliver it to your door expertly cleaned. And you can take the time pursuing your passions. Time once spent sorting and waiting, folding and queuing, now spent challenging and innovating and pushing your way to greatness. So pick up the Irish flute or those calligraphy pens or that daunting beef Wellington recipe card and leave the laundry to us. Rinse. It's time to be great.